Hi, welcome back to my homemade bass guitar video series part 2, Shaping the Body. In the first video, I explained the motivation why I gave it a try to build a smaller bass guitar for myself and my expectation on design. For this video, I will go through how I chose the body material, shaped the body, cut the cavities and shaped the headstock. For viewers who didn't watch my first video, please be advised this is a collection of home videos and pictures taken when I made my first bass guitar using cheap parts, scrap wood and simple tools. It's a memory recording to share with anyone who's curious or interested. If you are looking for a professional, informational, or educational guitar making video, this is not one of them. However, it may still be fun to watch how a newbie works things out in an unexpected way. Let's get started. Material. As I mentioned in the first video, I don't have a bandsaw or even table saw, and had no intention to buy one if I wasn't sure what I would do with it after the project, so I prefer softer wood that's easier to work with my existing tools, and the most common wood around is construction lumber from hardware store. There were some scrap 2x lumber in my garage left by the previous house owner, but nothing wider than a 2x10. I picked up a piece of 2x4 and a 2x10 thinking I can joint them together for the width I needed. Both had knots on them, but I only need roughly 20 inches by 13 inches, so I thought I could manage to get around them. I slide the wood back and forth and flip them all directions for a sweet spot according to the profile cardboard I drew, but still needed to live with some defects. From the picture, you can see I did have risk as there's not much space on both sides. I was lucky they turned out fine. Body. The tool I had was a second-hand jigsaw to cut the profile and tapering, and also a second-hand oscillating tool to cut the neck joint slot, pickup cavities, and electronics cavity. I understand guitar makers will use a whole piece of wood whenever possible unless artificial layers is required, and how they will do when a joint is required, but nothing I could do like they will. So I used 10 dowels to joint them together. This turned out to be a mistake when I tapered the edge, which exposed 2 of them. However, this defect turns out to be something I was happy to show to people how it was made. After I decided which sections and direction I would use for the body, I cut the sections and traced the body profile on the board. Since the electronics cavity will sit across 2 pieces, I used oscillating tool to cut it out before gluing them, thinking this could be easier. You can see from the pics that my so-so woodworking skill was just got the job done at my own acceptable level. Then I glued and clamped them together overnight, and cut it to shape using a jigsaw, flattened the bottom of the cavity using an edge trimmer, and planed the surface using a small planer and roughly sanded it a little. To my surprise, 2 very different looking pieces of wood came out with almost the same color, and the wood grain appears to be nice. I didn't see this coming and was quite happy for this. Neck joint. I clamped the neck with 2 levels to determine the center line so I know where to install the bridge, and also checked roughly where the pickups should locate. Subtracted the length of the neck from 30 inches, the neck is about 1 3/4 inches into the body. I traced around the neck and cut the joint slot with the oscillating tool, then deepened the slot by the edge trimmer and chisel. Again, you can clearly see how rough my woodworking skill level is from the picture. Edge tapering. Partially because of the weight consideration, I like thin body guitars very much for their streamlined look, namely Ibanez Sabre series guitars. Since there's no pressure making a guitar for myself, there's no reason not to try it here. Guitar makers use bandsaw, milling machine, or 3D whatever machine to get such job done. My option was pretty redneck using a jigsaw. Even with softer wood, it's still difficult and risky to control a jigsaw hanging and shouting in the air, making unstable angle cuts along the edge of the body. As you can see, the cut was extremely rough. Even a beaver does a better job, but it's okay for me because the jigsaw was just to cut away large chunks to save some efforts on rasp shaping. It's the first time I use a rasp. Was a little surprised this thing is so aggressive, but it may be just because the wood is soft, so the edge tapering didn't take too much time. The progress was so far so good for me. Pickup cavities. I'm not sure if there's a scientific paper on where the pickups should locate, but after checking over many guitar pictures, I decided the pickups should be installed right under the strings. I marked where I wanted the pickup set to be, and drilled hole on the screw positions, then used the oscillating tool to cut into the wood, chisel the chunks out, and flatten the cavities with the edge trimmer. Though the height of the pickups can be slightly adjusted by the screws, I was not so confident on the location and the depth, but I was lucky it turned out quite nice. Sanding. I used a sander for flat surface, sandpaper by hand for tapered surface, and a dowel wrapped by sandpaper for inner curves. Simply a time-consuming work, but really need some patience to make sure all surface and curves sanded to acceptable smooth. The sandpaper I used was 120 grit, that's all I had at that moment, and frankly I felt it's good enough for me to go on the finishing work. Headstock. My preference for headstock was pretty conservative, not something to wow people, but my brain didn't work well to come out anything nice, so finally decided to make a small Rickenbacker headstock. Can't go wrong with this shape. I had a hard time cutting the headstock because the wood was surprisingly hard, the curve was tight and the paddle was small for my jigsaw, so a scroll saw or bandsaw might be on my wish list if I decided to go for another project. That's pretty much all about shaping the guitar body and headstock. There were a lot of considerations, measurements, and dilemma that I can't explain in details. If you have question, please leave a comment. I'm no expert, but will try my best to answer. Next video is about the finishing of this bass guitar. Might be something unexpected to most of the people who intends to make a guitar. Don't miss it if you are interested. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you later.